lapping cars like that because you get right in the middle of a fight. It's like jumping in the middle of a dog fight. Look here.
Whoa! Vassar, and it looks like the Smith car as well. Mark Smith in trouble again. Jimmy Vassar over there on the right.
Mark Smith has been the victim of a lot of problems today.
Vassar has too. They had mechanical problems.
Oh my goodness! I had no idea he got that time.
Right over the wheels. That's what happens in open wheel racing when one car locks wheels with another.
I was just at dinner last night explaining this to people, how running over wheels is the most dangerous thing that can happen in IndyCar racing. And that's exactly what happens from it. They get airborne.
Well, Mark Smith was in a pre-race accident at Phoenix a week ago, suffered a head injury. They kept him overnight in the hospital and then released him. So he's back racing this week, and now he's involved in this. How sad.
At least he came down right side up, and that's the main thing. Open wheel cars are not going to get upside down.
It didn't appear that there was a concern for Mark. He's out of the car and okay.
Smith's car, of course, owned by Derek Walker Racing, who also owns Robbie Gordon's car and Willie T. Ribbs, and they've had any number of accidents so far this year. I think this might make the 7th or 8th, which is very bad luck.
Still looking at that battle as here comes Villeneuve moving up to the inside of Goodyear. Goodyear sees him there, lets him through, but that was close.
Oh, that was an impossible. I think Villeneuve just happened to be a young man, and nobody told him that he couldn't do that, so he went ahead and did it anyway.
Villeneuve, of course, the great French-Canadian, is 23. He's the youngest driver in the race here, and he is ambitious. He probably got a little over his head at Phoenix last week when he triggered that multi-car pileup. Didn't observe the yellow flags perhaps the way he should. You see, he is an ambitious driver. Barry Green, the crew chief there, says he is one of the most intelligent chassis drivers that he's ever worked with. Brings back the good information.
But Sam, you won't make a pass like he just made very many times without a little collision.
Without getting away with it, I know.
Is that the patented Bobby Unser move there? We've seen you do that.
I was sitting here crossing my fingers when I saw that thing happening, when I saw him go to the outside.
Yeah, we never had to do that for you, Bobby.
No, I hope not.
And look at him as he loses the back end again. But that's been one of the reported problems with both the Lola and the Renard. They lose the back end. Now he's wandering all over the place. You wonder if he doesn't have a bad tire.
That is a Renard car he's driving, by the way. The blue car we're talking about in the center here at this battle.
I think there's nothing wrong with that car. It's just the fact that kid is trying hard. 23 years old. He really doesn't know any better yet.
Around Marco Greco, but then into the wall. Into that tire barrier, loses it, but he keeps it going.
That's what I mean. I'm telling you, that's what's nice to be 23 years of age. He doesn't even know these race cars can fight you yet.
Damage to the rear wing. That's a shortcut into the pits that you are allowed to take if you have a problem with the car. It looks like if he can get rid of that banner, maybe pop rivet that wing back in place, he's going to go again.
Quick thinking to duck into the pits that way.
Yeah, remember now, the rear wing is broken. You look at the piece hanging down from it.
We really did
That's
see.
not a livable situation on the racetrack going fast. That's something they'll have to fix.
He was over his head there. It was exciting to watch, but he was over his head.
That's not a car problem, Sam. He's just like you said.
Already the team has the spare wing out and they're ready to go. And we're going to keep an eye here because best indications are that Al Unser Jr. may head for the pits anytime now, and here he is. So Al Unser Jr. comes in for his stop, Jack.
And Paul, there was some debate as to whether they would make a wing adjustment on the front of the car. Richard Buck goes to work, and they do. They adjust the wing. They're going to change all 4 tires. A nominal stop this way. You can see a lot of the dust that comes off the actual brake rotors from the use of the brakes here at the Long Beach. Remember, they shift 1,690 times. Little Al having trouble shifting that time to get back out in a little over 18.4 seconds.
Now, another thing to remember as you watch Little Al lead, the speed limit in the pits today, 60 miles an hour. What they call the drop dead means they get a black flag, 66. If the radar gun says 66, until they get right there, they have to pull them in on a black flag. Over the blue line there, only 2 tires. Jack told us this from the drivers' meeting today.
And ironically, it's hard to keep these cars down to 60 in the pit lane, particularly when you launch them, because by the time the wheels have stopped spinning in that low gear, you're up over 60.
Emerson Fittipaldi picked up the lead of the race, but he comes in for his stop now on the 41st lap, Jack.
And Paul, watch for some tactics unfolding. They connect the hose. The word we got is they may very well just put enough fuel in, the amount of fuel that it takes to change all 4 tires. We're going to wait and see if that's what they do. That's exactly what they do. A tactical move, Gary Gerald.
Nigel Mansell's crew servicing him for the first time off the jacks. This is a good stop. Now a delay on the fuel. He's rolling in 13.8 seconds.
Great stop for the Newman-Haas team. Fascinating stop for Penske. It takes longer to fuel than it does to change tires, and they decided to just drop it as soon as the tires were changed, eh, Jack?
Well, here's what they're going to try and do. They were debating whether they should make that type of stop now or for their final stop. It's what we call a time stop. They've calculated their fuel, and they feel that in one of the stops they weren't going to take on a full load. They felt that with the way Al Unser Jr. is running, that now's the time to lay the cards on the table and see what their compatriot Roger Penske will do to match that in the last stop. Now, the last stop will be the long stop because they got to take on a full load of fuel.
Bobby, normally it's a switch of that. You time stop the last stop.
It's the first time I've ever seen it
Absolutely,
done.
and now we're getting word that number 31, Al Unser Jr. may be getting a stop-and-go penalty.
Yeah, it looked to me like in the first seconds after he started away from his pits, he might have exceeded that 60.
Let me tell you, it's very difficult. All the drivers say that in second gear, trying to go between 60 and 70 miles an hour is critical. He was clocked reportedly at 80 miles an hour. In fact, Al Unser Jr. was one of the drivers in the drivers' meeting that lobbied really hard to try and have the actual speed limit raised from 60 to 70, but he lost in a blind vote of all the drivers in the field.
So many things happening at once here. We saw another car stuck into the tire barrier. We'll try to get you up to speed on everything. Well, that was Marco Greco, who was having such a great race up until then, so we'll keep track of that. And let's take a look. There comes the 2 car through.
Now, Little Al still came out in the lead on all this pit stop strategy, Paul, but remember, what you gain one time, you're going to pay for it later on. So I'm not too sure a strategy like that is good.
Yeah, here he comes.
Here's Little Al coming in for it, obviously the stop-and-go penalty. And people have to realize they run a car that's capable of 230, 240 miles an hour down to 60 miles an hour is sometimes just utterly ridiculous. So a lot of the drivers could be having that problem today.
This, of course, puts Emerson Fittipaldi into the lead. The first time he has ever led a race here at Long Beach. Interesting.
Bobby, there has been some concern, a couple of people that we've talked to this weekend, most notably A.J. Foyt, that they're so fast on that black flag for exceeding the speed limit in the pits, and yet no penalty last week for Nigel Mansell at Phoenix when he jumped over the grass strip and got out on the race course, and no penalty for Villeneuve after coming around and hitting Mashusta in that accident at Phoenix.
Paul, what it is, a lot of the racing people today are screaming politics, inadequate officiating by Wally Dallenbeck, the chief steward, who on race day is totally in charge. And I think that there's something to some of this stuff. Certain guys get penalized, and they seem to get penalized often. Other guys don't get penalties at all. For example, Nigel Mansell right there, the number 1.
Inside of Michael Andretti. Very exciting.
Almost collided with Michael there. But Nigel has
Father
really
and son are having an argument here.
Yeah, Nigel has been kind of immune to penalties, and I think everybody's getting a little bit tired of that.
Let's go pit side, Gary Gerald.
Just a quick update on Villeneuve. He came in, and while that whole flurry of pit stops was taking place up and down the road, the Forsyth Green team replaced the entire rear wing. He's now back on course. They had some damage up around the wicker bill, so they replaced the whole rear wing assembly. Lost a lot of time, but he's still in the competition. Also, we've had reports of a couple of more of those pit lane violations. Davy Jones, 68 miles an hour. They were going to penalize Greco. As you mentioned, he ended up in a tire barrier.
Villeneuve lost 5 laps and dropped to 20th position with that long stop while they repaired the wing. Still pretty quick service there. Let's give you the top of the order. Emerson Fittipaldi leads it, followed by Al Unser Jr. 15 seconds behind. Then Nigel Mansell, Robbie Gordon, Raul Boisel. We're watching Mario. They came through a yellow flag that flies for Marco Greco at the end of the main straightaway. Mario and Michael are running together on this course, and as we've seen, have been at one another fairly constantly in the last few laps. So it's still Fittipaldi, or now Fittipaldi in reality, that leads at the Toyota Grand Prix of Long Beach. This is Paul Page. We're back at the Toyota Grand Prix of Long Beach, where the yellow flags fly in tandem, 2 of them at the start-finish line, indicating a full course yellow. So they will now line up behind Johnny Rutherford in the pace car, and any advantage, which was 12 seconds, that Emerson Fittipaldi had gained over Al Unser Jr. is now lost. While we don't have an official reason, one suspects that cars which are in barriers all around the course are the reason. They want to get all of the safety equipment out, get everything pulled out of the barriers, and the course clear again. Wouldn't you say, Bobby?
Oh, it certainly is right, Paul. There comes a point in time where they just have to say there's too many cars in too many places, and they could have wrecks starting to stack up on top of the wreck. So they have to stop and clean it all up.
Marco Greco's car in the barrier there, and out comes the record to get that one. Last week at Phoenix, race fans saw one of the most frightening crashes in recent history. Gary Gerald had an opportunity to look more closely at that incident.
Without question, the incident that we saw last week in Turn 4 at Phoenix has to be one of the most frightening incidents that we've seen in recent years in IndyCar racing. Let's go back and reconstruct this scenario. Coming out of Turn 3, incidental contact between Hiro Matsushita and Teo Fabi. And as they spun up toward the wall, Paul Tracy's car was collected as well. Hiro was left setting broadside to the traffic. And several seconds later, Jacques Villeneuve came rushing toward Turn 4, jumped on the brakes, but hit Hiro literally broadside. Amazingly, all the drivers were able to walk away relatively uninjured. Let's take a look at what remains now of Hiro's car. You can see that here the cockpit where the driver sits facing in this direction, but the monocoque with all the carbon fiber all intact. It was cracked down inside, but it did stand up under the punishment. Here's where the impact came across, right behind the roll bar. And you can see it tore through the carbon fiber. It separated the whole rear half of the car. There are 4 large mounting bolts back here where the engine is located. All of that just literally ripped away. But perhaps the most astounding aspect of this crash is right here, around this fuel cell. There were 35 gallons of methanol here. And for the first time in recent years, we saw a fuel cell rupture. And it's an absolute miracle that that fuel didn't ignite, and we would have had fire on top of that horrifying crash. Now, from Villeneuve's standpoint, you can see the remains of the damaged chassis or tub. This is the nose section that was so graphically chewed and torn up by that horrendous impact. All of the carbon fiber literally shredded. And thanks to a rules change made in IndyCar just over a year or so ago, the driver's footbox area was lengthened, the driver moved back, an extra bulkhead was placed in here, and because of those changes, Villeneuve was able to walk away without any injury to his feet. It's also interesting to take a look at some downloaded information from the onboard computer. This charts the speed on the lap just ahead of the impact. Speed building on the back straightaway to 190 miles per hour. Then as he came upon the problem, he's under braking here, slowing down dramatically to a point when suddenly we saw the brake smoke. This is where he locked up the brakes. The impact came a fraction of a second thereafter at just over 100 miles per hour. Obviously, for young Villeneuve, it had to be a terrifying moment when he realized that he was about to hit a helpless fellow driver.
Well, you always learn from your mistake. You know, I know that the subject of the yellow light had been brought up in the driver's briefing because they're very tough. They were very tough to see, and well, you know, it just happened on us. It could happen on anybody, and at those speeds, you know, it's just a flicker of a second, and if you miss a yellow light, something big can happen, and well, I'm going to be looking for them.
Gary, surprisingly in the drivers' meeting, very little was said about that particular incident at Phoenix International Raceway. As you alluded to, a lot more discussion, though, about the incident that involved Nigel Mansell, where after a pit stop, he accelerated through the warm-up lane and literally spun into the racing groove, exiting in the wrong area directly in front of Scott Goodyear. Now, there was a lot of heated discussion about that, why there wasn't a penalty. And Wally Dallenbach, to his credit, said there is nothing in writing. There was no, as far as what the penalty should be, or as we have at Michigan International Speedway, a situation that was addressed last year. He threw it open to the drivers and he explained to them, gentlemen, from this day forward, if you want to discuss a rule, paint a line, show that it's no different than when Mario Andretti spun 180 degrees on pit road last year at MIS, we'll address it then, but we can't do it retroactively.